Hi everyone, a very good evening to all of you and welcome to the Aifer Final Lab webinar. I hope all of you can hear me clearly. If at all you have any issues in hearing, please text me because I have to clear that in the beginning of the session itself. So I guess we'll continue, assuming that all of you can hear from your responses. So I'm Dhanya Sudarshanan. I'll be handling a very special area of your, if at all, like when you join, I'm very hopeful that all of you will be there in my class when we start this course. And I'll be handling literary criticism and theory. So I know it's a bit confusing. People think that it is scary and confusing, and you always feel like you don't get the complete grip of the subject. There might be many of you who are very interested and who feel that it's not so tough also, but usually the response is that. So first of all, I want to tell you that you should not be scared or you should not be like reluctant to learn and understand more about theory and literary criticism. So we will go on and we'll discuss things and how we'll be interacting and trying to understand the topics one by one from the base level to the higher levels will be discussed in this session. So I hope all of you are ready to dive into this session. Okay. So what I'm planning to do is give you a gist of what we'll be discussing in detail in our course. I hope you know that we have video recorded classes and also we have live classes. So whether it's recorded or live class, you will be getting detailed sessions of what we are discussing right now and in terms of PPTs and notes. Okay. So I'll be sharing my screen and we don't have much time, so we will begin this fast. So originally, or what is literature basically, all of you know that. I'm not going into that in detail. Originally, it referred to any written printed matter on any subject. And the rise of the notion of literature is intimately related to the growth of print industry. Printing texts popularized literature, as you all know, and people had more time in understanding, reading, and analyzing or thinking more about literature, and people started getting interested in literature in the 18th century. So from there, we come to our topic, what is criticism and what is literary theory, literary criticism and literary theory. So first we should know what is criticism, right? We all do that in day-to-day life, actually. We all do different kind of, on a day-to-day basis. When you watch a movie, when you go to a function where you see a lot of decoration and maybe a wedding or anything, you comment on the food, the decoration, the people there, the way they have welcomed you, everything about that. So this is not criticism in the negative sense, where you say bad things or degrading things, derogatory things about people or concepts or society. This is not that. But criticism is basically evaluating something, like trying to understand how good it was or how valuable it was. What are the positives of that? What are the negatives of that? That is basically criticism, what we are discussing here right now, from the point of view of your UGC NET exam. As per our syllabus, we have this broad topic, which is literary criticism and theory. So criticism is basically understanding or making meaning of a literary work in the literary context. Basically, criticism means like trying to place something, like trying to evaluate something, trying to understand the good and bad parts of that, positives and negatives of that. So in literary criticism, obviously it is about literary works. So how do you evaluate a piece of literature? Like we basically try to understand what it is all about, how it makes sense to the reader, what is the meaning underlying that, in which category does this work belong to, whether it's children's literature or romance or travelogue, whatever it is. So there is this evaluating, classifying, interpreting of literature. This is known as literary criticism. We have to go fast. So it is basically defining, classifying, analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating works of literature. So basically, there are two types of literary criticism, like where great writers or authors or social reformers or whatever you call them, like from Aristotle, Plato, people tried to give instructions or guidelines on how art should be, how poetry should be, how drama should be, how tragedy should be. I'm sure being literary students, literature students, you might have gone through all that. So there is two kinds of criticism. One is giving instructions or guidelines or suggestions, or basically giving do's and don'ts about literature, how literature should be, how it should be useful for the society, for the people, etc. The other kind of literary criticism is where you take a particular work of literature and you try to make sense of that. You try to understand that, you try to evaluate that, classify, interpret, and there are quite a different array of ways to do that. Okay, so these are the two types of literary criticism. And when we as a person, not a great author or a very well-read or resourceful person, we want to interpret literature or a literary work, we need certain tools or a certain method, a framework to do that. You cannot just go ahead and value a literary work and expect others to understand that. Or you are picking up a book, for example, Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things. You can interpret, you might be loving that book to the core as a reader, but when you want to analyze and interpret and evaluate this work, you have to put up a framework or use some tools, methodology, or terminology, like words, to distinguish one from another, so that what you have written or what you have evaluated or what you have thought about that work becomes understandable for another person. Or there should be a globally understandable set of terms, method, etc. in evaluating literature. So literary criticism can be all chaos without literary theory. This framework, this tools, this set of tools, or basically words, terminology, methods, etc., followed for evaluating, classifying, analyzing, and interpreting a work of a literary work is literary theory. Okay. So this is what we discussed just now. You can see that in the slide. So theory before theory and all, we are not going into that. I hope you join my class and we'll be discussing detail about all that. So I hope you got an understanding about what literary criticism is and what literary theory is and how they are connected and how important literary theory is. So as you know, there are different theories. You might have heard about new criticism, structuralism, Marxism, feminism, post-colonial theory, cultural studies, aesthetics, then whatnot. So why do you need all these theories, or how do you evaluate literature when you have so many theories? And how do we choose that, or why, what is the difference that it makes? So basically it is like looking through a glass, where a colored glass. If you are using a red colored glass, obviously the scenery, the picture around you will look little reddish. If you are using a green colored glass, it will look slightly greenish. Whatever you look will give that green hue, green tinge, right? So like that, whatever theory you use for analyzing literature, it will affect or it will decide the uh, outcome of the work that you are doing. That is the criticism that you're doing. The example I just stated just now is that uh, God of Small Things. God of Small Things is a work which can be appreciated well as a reader, and you can interpret that in mainly, there could be other theories also you can apply, but you can use a Marxist point of view as well as a feminist point of view. Where in the Marxist point of view, you will be discussing and evaluating and understanding deep or understanding and diving deep into the class struggle and class consciousness, which is very clear in the novel. There is the background of Kerala and the caste system and all that. It is very clear, and you can evaluate the work based on that. And there is a clear another track. There is a very clear path that you can take. That is a feministic take on that work. There is a clear abuse or exploitation and so many layers of emotions and feelings that the women of the novel go through. You can focus on that and work on that. So for both these paths, any path you choose, you need a lot of assumptions, basic assumptions, terminologies, ideas, methods that you follow to make your work useful or fruitful. So that is how important literary criticism and literary theory is. Being literature students, I would strongly suggest that you should never ever shy away from literary criticism and theory, because that is the base, that is the core, that is the core. Without that, nothing is important. You should understand, you should be able to analyze, you should be able to see through that work and how that work contributes to society and people. That is the basic that is needed. You cannot just say that art is for art's sake and there is no commitment to society. Increasingly, we are seeing that different art forms, how they affect society, and social commitment is expected from artists. So this is becoming more and more important. So now we will go through another set of slides where you can see more about the major theorists. Like, let me share my screen again. We have to move fast. So classical art and criticism. So before these theories formed and originated in the way we know these theories now, there were obviously people who contributed to art and literary criticism and theory, as I already mentioned, like people like Aristotle, Plato, Horace, Longinus, etc. And when did this start? This started as early as in the BCs, right? 500 BC. So from there, you can see a prolific contribution towards literary criticism, which they gave, who were very understandable and knowledgeable about society, people, and all. And considering the other parts of the world, they were very much into progress, and they had these art forms. So they had the courage and they had the audacity to define art and how it should be and how useful how it can be useful to society, why poetry should be considered as something bad for society, and all. There are a whole lot of things which you should learn and which you should know about from classical art and criticism. So we'll have a run through all the slides. So it's an introduction, basically, like how when this Greek and Roman literature started, the literary models and contribution towards criticism. Basically, they called, or they didn't have the word literary criticism, but they had this subject, or they had this discussion about something called poiesis. That was the term for literary criticism in those days. This is just showing a timeline, like BC, AD, that things, the duration and all. We are not going in detail into all that. We will have time. I really hope that we'll meet in the class and we'll discuss all of these in detail. So this is about Plato, who was the disciple of Socrates, as you know, and his academy in Athens. And basically, Plato, there is a saying about Plato that the safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. That means Plato had an idea of almost all the things, important things in art. So whatever have developed after that, still they should be courteous to whom? Plato. So his critical concepts like art is mimesis or imitation, the idea that everything, the original exists and whatever you see in this world is not the original, it is a copy. And he believed that, what was his belief about poetry? He believed that poetry is not good for society because poetry creates or inspires baser emotions, which is not good for people. And there is the cave image, the concept of metaphor of education, etc., which we have to look in detail. We'll look into all that later. And Aristotle, Plato's disciple, who had a different take on mimesis. He definitely believed that art is mimesis or imitation, but he did not think so low or bad about imitation. He thinks that it's natural and it's essential for human growth. Then we have his definition of tragedy, elements of tragedy, and all these we have to look into detail when you actually prepare for NET. There are important questions which always come from these sections. And Horace, the Roman lyric poet and a great contributor towards literary criticism, his major works, his definition of poetry, how he defined poetry, how he dissected poetry, and what he thought about is important in poetry, and all that. You have to see that, you have to go through all that. Then we come to Longinus. His major work, or whatever work we got from him, is Perihypsos, or On the Sublime, which has inspired a lot of literary critics later, and centuries later, he still inspires critics. Then effects of sublime, the constituent elements of sublime. So actually, this is a very brief PPT which I have prepared for this purpose. There is a lot more in the PPT which we use for classes. So I cannot handle that within such a short time period. So what you should understand is we will be having detailed classes on all these topics, and we'll be moving on to major critics. And then we will have major critics includes like Sidney, John Dryden, Johnson, Dr. Johnson, then Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, T.S. Eliot, and so on and so forth. And then we come to all the theories like neo-criticism to, it goes on like structuralism, formalism, feminism, Marxism, like that it goes on. And all of these, we have detailed PPTs where each of the points will be listed with details. Each concept will be discussed in detail along with the PPT, and you will also get separate notes discussing all this. And after the classes, you will be having mentor sessions. You will have a lot of discussions. You will have a lot of questions. You will have a lot of practice tests from previous question papers and new content which is prepared by the scholars here. So you will have mentor group work with a mentor to help you. All this will happen after the classes. Okay, so I don't want to miss these points. That is why I told those now itself, because we have very limited time. Now, major critics, I told you, we have topics on major critics, which is important in your syllabus. Questions are asked frequently. So Sir Philip Sidney, who was an Elizabethan courtier and poet, and his charges, he was basically replying to a work of art in his famous work, Defense of Poesy, Apology for Poetry, which is the translation or the current usage. And his concept, his thought about work, literature, poetry and art. And there are many more critics which you have to discuss in detail I'm just giving you a gist of what we have in store. Samuel Johnson, their literary contests, their major works, their works will be discussed in detail. So I told you this is not the full PPT. This is prepared for this webinar only. I have a detailed PPT on all of these. Now, William Wordsworth, our very own Wordsworth, the Romantic poet, the pioneer of Romanticism, S.T. Coleridge. Who doesn't know Kubla Khan, right? Then his works, his concept of imagination and fancy, how he criticized Wordsworth, who was his very own friend and contributor towards literature, but still he was not very soft in criticizing Wordsworth. Matthew Arnold, his contribution, role of poetry and criticism in society, the study of poetry, Arnold's thoughts as a moralist, his idea about the concept of architectonics, the function of criticism. We are also discussing their major works, the touchstone method, which is the greatest contribution by Arnold. Then we have our very own Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, who is kind of a contributor or a predecessor of the concept of post-truth theory, which we experience or which we talk about a lot in this era. And he actually contributed, or he actually laid the path for these concepts. He has a lot of interesting concepts, and he was real genius, out of the world was his thoughts at that time. Then we try to understand in detail about him, his perspective of truth, Christianity, morality, the ideal superior man of the future, Übermensch, the doctrine of eternal recurrence, etc. Then we have T.S. Eliot, his tradition and individual talent, which is a very important work of him from the point of literary criticism, and his major concepts like objective correlative, dissociation of sensibility, unification of sensibility, etc., which are very important, and his idea of the creative process, which is very much opposing to the concept of the creative process, which was put forward by romantics like Wordsworth and Coleridge. Then Ezra Pound, who is famous for his imagist style of writing, right? And the contribution of all these people towards major literary styles, different styles, and their ideas, their contribution, all will be discussed in detail. Now we'll move on to our PPT, a brief PPT on theories. I know it's too much for you, but we have to move a bit fast and understand what we all have. What this is basically to make you understand how vast the topic is and what all you have to be knowledgeable about when you prepare for this exam, which is very competitive. So let me open that. Okay, so I'm just having a short recap. We try to understand what literary criticism is, how theory comes into the picture, how important theory is, why people like us need theory, different theories to evaluate and understand the merit of a work of literature. And we went through the contribution of all the ancient critics and the great critics who followed them, from Philip Sidney till Ezra Pound. We had a long list of people we discussed. We just had a gist of everything. Now we are looking into the different theories. So you can also have a look whether I have missed something which comes in your syllabus. Okay, I hope everything is included. So we have new criticism and its introduction. It came into vogue in the 1920s to 1960s. And this came into vogue through the publication of the work, The New Criticism by John Crowe Ransom in 1941. This name is important. This work is important, how this word got introduced into the literary circles. Now, the key concepts. Thank you for all the responses, students. I'm missing hearing your voices, but I hope we'll have a chance to meet in classes and have detailed discussion. So the key concepts of new criticism. here the text is most important. Text is given ultimate focus and importance, and anything outside the text is not considered. The focus is on text, considering it as what most important and all covering. It is text is everything. That is the concept here. So these we will be discussing all this, like the focus, what are the literary devices. When it is about the text, it is about literary devices, right? The metaphor, metonymy, etc. So the other major proponents, we will be discussing the major proponents of this theory, and how they, what was their belief about literature, how do they analyze literature, all that. And the Russian counterpart of New Criticism. New Criticism, where people believed that, or the critics believed that everything is there in the text, and the text has to be closely analyzed to understand the value of the literature or the literary piece of work. Formalism is the Russian counterpart of New Criticism, American New Criticism. Okay, formalism is the Russian counterpart of American New Criticism, which originated in the second decade of 20th century. So they gave more focus to grammar, syntax, literary devices, etc. Now, the major theorists, you can see the names of the major theorists: Roman Jakobson, Boris Eshbaum, and Victor Shklovsky. And there are so many things that you have to learn in formalism, like the focus on form, organization, structure, etc. And in detail, we'll be discussing all that. Literariness, the concept of literariness, which is important. Defamiliarization, this is another important term. Metaphor and metonymy. I hope you all know what metaphor is. Try to think what is metonymy. Now, meter, how important did they consider meter? Then the comparison, a slight comparison between formalism and American New Criticism. The similarity is that they focus on text completely, but you cannot say that both of them are same, because their focus, what they focused inside the text was quite different. But they were similar in the way that they completely believed in the autonomy of the text. They completely believed that text should be closely watched and analyzed, but what they analyzed in the text was slightly different. Then we come to structuralism and post-structuralism. Structuralism is you could find it slightly tough, even I mean to say post-structuralism, mainly people usually tend to find it the terms and everything slightly confusing, but I would say that it's the most interesting theories, like post-structuralism and structuralism. Post-structuralism comes after structuralism, but post-structuralism is a theory which influenced all other theories, or the formation of theories, and still the things, the beliefs, the concepts we have in this world have a great connection with this post-structuralist theory. So structuralism originated in France in 1950s. And you should understand the key concepts of structuralism. Basically, structuralism believes that there is nothing that you can understand in isolation. Everything is part of a greater structure. Only if you understand the structure, you can interpret meaning. So basically, structuralism put forward the idea that there is no real meaning connected to anything or any word. For example, if you say this is a tree, you look at a tree and say that, see this picture, there is a tree in the picture and there is a name, tree. But in another language, tree, for example, in Malayalam, you know that it's maram. In Hindi, it's ped, right? So there is no actual connection between the concept or the physical entity of tree, that physical entity which exists in nature, and the name attributed to it. So this name and this physical thing doesn't have any connection. So structuralists believe that people give meaning to things arbitrarily. It is not, there is no definition, or there is no particular meaning or particular that word which denotes something doesn't have any particular connection with that physical entity. It is just based on a set of beliefs that you tend to attribute that. Okay. And there are some more concepts which you have to look into. These things we'll be discussing in detail, like there is only a picture which we'll be discussing in detail what it's all about. And all that. Now, the metaphor of bricklayer and engineer is an important part in structuralism. Then there is a bull's head by Pablo Picasso. The concept of the death of author, the concept of death of author comes from the idea that author cannot control what the reader thinks about a work of literature. Whatever the author has written and left is left. He is not in the picture anymore. Now the reader is the one who can interpret a work of literature. Okay, 1 second. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I think you missed the PPT. Sorry for that. So we were, I hope you can see that now. Okay, really sorry for that hiccup, guys. So this is, I was discussing about neo-criticism and how it focuses on literary devices. Then we discussed about formalism, which is the Russian counterpart of American neo-criticism, which is exactly not same. We will look into that in detail. Then we discussed about the major concepts. We did not discuss, we just named it. We don't have the time to discuss it fully. Now, structuralism and post-structuralism. So the key concepts in structuralism, and the idea that meaning is attributed to words. There is no exact meaning related to any particular word, and it's all based on how we attribute meaning. Okay. Now, post-structuralism emerged in France during 1960s as a movement critiquing structuralism. I already told you about that. From the name itself, you can understand that structuralism and post-structuralism. And who are the major proponents? Jacques Derrida, Derridian theory of decentering and logocentrism. Then Derrida's deconstruction. It's a very important concept, deconstruction of the center. Then phonocentrism, the assumption that spoken text is more important than written text. And the traces of meaning, the concept of traces of meaning in literary works. Another important concept, difference. We will be discussing all this in detail with examples. We will not only be discussing the concept, we will also be discussing examples in real life to understand the concept completely. Then deconstruction, binaries within the text, the concept of aporia, and the concept that there is no outside text. Then Michael Foucault, who contributed to deconstruction and post-structuralism. So his major works and three factors which limit the expansion of discourse. What is the concept of discourse? How is it important in society? How discourse is produced in society? And what limits the production of discourse? All this we'll be discussing. Okay. Then the concept of panopticism. We have a lot, we have to move fast. I hope you can see the screen now. I hope there are no one who is not able to see the screen now. Then we have modernism and post-modernism. So like structuralism and post-structuralism, modernism originated or gained popularity in the 20th century. Modernism is not limited to literature. It can be observed, or it was observed in architecture, paintings, etc. So this is an example of modernist painting and modernist architecture, which actually came ahead, completely destroying all the existing examples or believed things or accepted ideas, accepted notions, something different, something new. Like the concept was, why not? Why not try something new? That is how modernism originated in art, literature, architecture, etc. Maybe it will take a moment to get reflected after that. I'm getting a lot of thumbs ups. I don't know, like, is it like some people are able to see and some people are not? Ah, okay. Sorry, guys, really sorry. We have a limited time and in a hurry, so I couldn't actually understand, but I was sharing it, but something got wrong in between. So avant-garde movement is an important part of modernism. Yeah. Now, what is the difference between modernism and postmodernism? What is parody and what is pastiche? All these we'll be discussing. Then there is a comparison with some differences between, basic difference between modernism and postmodernism, and basic tenets of postmodernism. Okay. Who are the landmarks? What were the landmarks and who are the major contributors towards this idea of literary criticism, and in general, who were the major proponents? Baudrillard, Lyotard, simulation versus simulacra. This is an important concept. Always questions come from this area. Then psychoanalytic criticism. I'm not going in detail into that. You all know about Freud and Carl Jung and all these people, like Lacan. So psychoanalytic criticism will be just, you can just have a look of the slides. Okay. It was known as talking cure. The major works of Freud and the Freudian mind, the unconscious mind, the concept of id, ego and superego, which you have to discuss in detail, the concept of parapraxis or slip of tongue, and the mind, the consciousness which works behind that. All these are Freud's concepts which are highly debated these days, but we have to learn that, we have to understand that. Eros and Thanatos. Dreams, how he tried to define dreams, how he tried to analyze dreams and divide it into parts and understand the process. Psychosexual development stages of kids. Then basically, what does Freudian critics or what does psychoanalytic critics do? How do they analyze literature? We'll be looking into that. Jacques Lacan, unconscious is structured like language. There is a whole lot of concepts to discuss in this. Collective unconscious. Now there is reader response criticism. As the name itself indicates, it is all about the belief that it is the work, the value of a piece of literature is in the way or how a reader analyzes it, or what kind of an emotion or what kind of a response does the literary piece of work evoke in the reader. Okay. So there are some few concepts which you have to discuss. The major proponents were Wolfgang Isser, and there is the concept of implied reader and actual reader. Interpretive communities is another concept in this. Okay. Anxiety of influence, interesting concept. Stanley Fish is another major contributor who wrote about interpretive communities. Then there is New Historicism. New Historicism is a literary theory or a way, a method of analyzing literature where history is equally important as literature, or historical documents are considered as equally valuable and important as literary documents. So there is no prominence given to literary works, and literary works are completely placed in the historical context. Like, why did a writer like that? It is because he lived in so-and-so era, so-and-so economy, so-and-so social political context. That is why Shakespeare wrote like that, or trying to understand the historical context of the work and analyzing those side by side, giving equal importance to both. It's a very interesting theory also. New and old historicism, what is the difference? And the concept of panopticon and all comes here also. What does new historicists do? The concept of the fairy queen, we'll discuss all that. Then feminism and feminist criticism. Okay, you all must have heard about it, I'm sure about that, and the different phases, movements of feminism. There are a lot of people who we have to discuss works and concepts in feminism. The first wave, second wave, and third wave, the major works. Then there is the major works, major quotes, discussions, all have to be done. Then notable works. Okay, the concept of écriture feminine, symbolic and semiotic language, how it is connected to with patriarchy and feminism. Then gynocriticism, feminist criticism and psychoanalysis, how they contributed to each other, penis envy, social castration. Then we have Marxism. Marxism is a materialistic philosophy. You know about Marx and Engels and their Communist Manifesto, which was published in 1848. Still, this ideology influences the world, right? And the key concepts in Marxism, there are a few concepts like reification, alienation, commodity fetish, bourgeois, proletariat, economic determinism, etc. We will be discussing in detail in this session. Now, there are a lot of concepts. We have to move on to the PYQ. So that is why I'm hurrying. So the queer theory and about lesbian feminism and gay studies, all these we have. That is another theory which we have to know in detail. And there is trauma theory, defining and understanding trauma, what it's all about, how it affects the human psyche, how is it connected with the unconscious, and how is it expressed in language, the different theories connected with trauma, etc. There is a classic model and there is an alternative approach. There are different approaches which comes under one umbrella. All these we'll be discussing in detail. Then there is post-colonial theory. Yeah, post-colonial theory, from the name itself, you understand that it's the study of or study of literature in connection with the colonialism, the effects of colonialism, the effects after that, how it is still existing. Like as a country, India, we were colonized and we know how deep rooted the effects are and how it reflects in our literature, how we adapt with it, how we cope with it, how we struggle, how we fight against it. All that is analyzed in post-colonial literature. The major works are the major people, proponents are Gayatri Spivak, Homi Bhabha, Edward Said, Bill Ashcroft, etc. The major works which we'll be discussing in detail. The concepts, Eurocentrism, exotic other, demonic other, neocolonialism. Then the transitional phases, there are different phases which are analyzed and interpreted in literature of colonized countries. Then there is eco-criticism, which is connecting nature with literature or interpreting how nature is expressed and portrayed in literature. That is basically eco-criticism. It has a lot of connection with environmental studies. The origins, we can go back to Hebrew Bible, the description of Garden of Eden. That is how we can say nature was described for the first time in literature. Then there is Indian aesthetics. We don't have a lot of concepts in this, but the Saundarya Shastra, then theory of rasa, theory of dhvani, navarasas and denotations, major concepts like Vachyartha, Vyangyartha, etc. will be coming under this. Then we have cultural studies. Cultural studies is a very important theory, which is always important. And you cannot limit cultural studies into anything. You cannot even trace its beginning. It was always there, we should say. So there are few concepts, not a few concepts, there are a lot of concepts we have to discuss under cultural studies. These are the major theorists who put forward great ideas and works towards this cultural studies. The long revolution actually predicts the condition which we are we all as a society are completely engaged and engrossed in our mobiles and browsing and all that. This was a long back predicted in this work, it seems. Then different concepts in culture, then ideology, hegemony, base and superstructure, cultural materialism, then how this the idea of culture is propagated, how it is circulated, how it is reproduced, all that will be discussed. Then encoding and decoding. Okay. Okay. Now we have to hurry to the PPT, so the PYQ slide. I'm sorry that I don't have time to discuss more about all this, but hopefully we'll meet soon. So let me share my screen again. Now you should tell me whether you're able to see my screen when I ask. Can you see my screen? Okay. So which among the following is a statement from the work, The Well-Wrought Urn? So I would expect you to give the answer in the chat box. Please don't be inactive, please respond. Which among the following is a statement from the work, The Well-Wrought Urn? So don't expect that these questions are from what we discussed right now. That is not possible. But there will be some questions which will definitely be from the topics we discussed. Somebody has replied D, somebody has replied A. So these are the options, A and D, A and C, C and D, none of the above. True poem is a simulacrum of reality. Paradox is the language appropriate to poetry. It's an experience rather than any mere statement about experience. Paradox is the language inevitable to poetry. So which are the options? B and D, D, A. So the correct answer is A and C. A, which says that true poem is a simulacrum of reality. Simulacrum is like it is a imitation, or it is something created from an original model. So it is, you cannot paraphrase it, or you cannot paraphrase a poetry, because that itself is an existence. It is something. You cannot reduce it into something. That is the concept, that true poem is a simulacrum of reality. And it's an experience rather than any mere statement about experience. So this is the work by Glenn Brooks, The Well-Wrought Urn, and the answer is A and C. Now, who stated that uncertainty or the overlap of meanings in the use of a word could be an enrichment of poetry rather than a fault? You can see the options, I hope. The second question. Who stated that uncertainty or the overlap of meanings in the use of a word could be an enrichment of poetry rather than a paradox, rather than a fault. I actually gave you a clue through slip of tongue or parapraxis in the terms of Freud. Did any of you notice that? Anonymous attendee, who is that? Anyway, he or she gave the answer, I.A. Richards. Others are silent. B. Sorry, the right answer is William Empson. In his language of paradox, he has given this statement. And this definition is this uncertainty or the overlap of meanings in the use of a word is actually paradox. Okay, it could be an enrichment of poetry rather than a fault. Now, third one, the statement that language has the bipolar structure oscillating between the poles of metaphor and metonymy is from the work. There are 4 different works mentioned here: Tradition and Individual Talent, 2 Aspects of Language and 2 Types of Aphasic Disturbances, 7 Types of Ambiguity, and Art as Technique. Which is the answer? Yeah. Anjita, that is the right answer. 2 Aspects of Language and 2 Types of Aphasic Disturbances. Is that a guess from the title, or did you actually know that? Okay, anyway, that is the right answer. Now, which among the following is not a key concept of structuralism? We had a brief discussion of structuralism. The nature of every entity in any situation has no significance by itself and is determined by all other entities involved in that situation. Meanings are attributed to the things by human mind, not contained within them. Text is autotelic and requires close reading. No human activity is natural or essential, but it is constructed. Which is the wrong answer? Anjita, oh, okay, it was a guess. Anyway, sometimes guesses also work in your favor if you're lucky. So it's not a problem. But we really hope that you will really know it after the course. So anyone? Structuralism? So here the key is that even you have some idea about structuralism, right? There is no significance, that everything is connected, meanings are attributed. You know that it's about structuralism. So this third option, text is autotelic and requires close reading. Which theory does it connect to from what we discussed today? Text is autotelic and requires close reading. Which theory propagates that idea? Yeah, Diana Varghese, the right answer is B. Good. So this, sorry, it is not B, it is C. Text is autotelic and requires close reading. I thought it is the second option. This is the concept put forward by new criticism or formalism, where the focus is on the text. So all other statements are about structuralism, and this is new criticism. Now, which of the following statements best describes the term deconstruction? Sorry, we did not have a detailed discussion about deconstruction, but if you have any idea, please answer. Akhila had replied, Sahla had replied that it's new criticism. Good. Fahmi also. Good. So what about this question? Which of the following statements best describes the term deconstruction? Deconstruction. Deconstruction comes under which theory? What you answered, C is the answer for structuralism. Anjita and Maushami and Jobina. But this is, we are trying to understand, or we are trying to find out the statement which best describes deconstruction, which is a concept which comes under structuralism, which has its own tenets. So if you have any idea about that, you will be able to answer. So deconstruction focuses on binaries and questions hierarchies. Like binaries means man, woman, rich, poor, fair, dark. Like these kind of binaries are questioned here. It is deconstructed. The construction, the idea that the white European man is the center of everything and his or her experience is the center and everything are aberrations or marginalized, that is deconstructed. So that is the right answer. A is the right answer. Okay. Now, which of the following statements does not define Foucault's description of discourse? Michel Foucault's description of discourse. Which of the following statements does not define? So we are running out of time. So the answer is D. That is, this is not a definition of discourse, but D, banned or unacceptable topics, is a definition of taboo. Okay. So others, these three statements describes discourse. Discourse we'll study in detail. In 1955, at a conference in Vienna, sorry, the answer was visible. Dash called for a new back to basics Freudianism. It is Jacques Lacan. The answer is C. Now, which of the statements below is not correct regarding the concept of interpretive communities? Interpretive communities comes under which theory? Can you say that, students? The concept of interpretive communities comes under which theory? I'm taking a little bit more time. If you're okay with that, we can finish the PYQ. It's just like 10 or 15 more questions. Okay, I hope it's okay. It could be useful for you. You will have an idea how questions come, how deep you should know. Okay. Reader response. Very good, Sahla Jasmine. The concept is from reader response, but I don't expect you to know in detail. So the answer is C. Interpretive communities focuses only on the intention of the author is wrong, because it is not about the author, it is about reader's response, right? The name itself indicates that it is reader response theory. It's not about the author. Now match the following statements with their writers. So match the following. Sex has a frequently neglected political aspect. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. I'm interested in women as words, women as words. Language is not a neutral medium, but one which contains many features which reflect its role as the instrument through which patriarchy finds expression. So these are the authors, and these are the options. So the answer is C. Answer is C. That is A. The first statement, succession frequently neglected political aspect, is by Kate Millett. And I'm sure you know that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, is by Simone de Beauvoir. Now, third one. The statement is by Mary Ellman. I am interested in women as words, is by Mary Ellman. And the third one and the fourth one is by Dale Spender. We'll be discussing in detail about all these feminist writers and theorists. Marxism observes that under capitalistic production system, the worker is de-skilled and made to perform fragmented, repetitive tasks in a sequence of whose nature and purpose he or she has no overall grasp. This is denoted by the term. This is denoted by which term? Commodity fetish, hegemony, reification, and economic determinism. Which is the term? The workers are de-skilled. Like that means in a factory, a worker will be creating one small part of a car. The door will be made by one person. The engine shaft will be prepared by another person. So basically, they have no idea. Even smaller things. If you are making a bag, the zip area will be, that portion will be done by another person. The leather, the stitching will be done by another person. The metallic parts will be attached by another person. So basically, they don't have the grip of what they are doing. This is known as C, reification. Good. 1 second. Sorry for that. So, So reification is the right answer. Okay. Now, dash is the philosophy which is based on the belief that ultimate source of all meaning and value is the lived experience of human beings. Anyone? Epistemology, nihilism, phenomenology, and euphemism. It is phenomenology. Phenomenology is the right answer. Which among the following is the correct chronological order of publication of these works? So which are the works? The Wretched of the Earth, Nation and Narration, Culture and Imperialism, In Other Worlds. So which is the right order? So even if you don't know the right order, can somebody at least say which theory is these works related to? Can you say that? Which theory? The Wretched of the Earth, Nation and Narration, Culture and Imperialism, In Other Worlds. Very good, Akhila. Post-colonialism. So the combination is A, B, C. That is The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, 1961, I guess. Then comes In Other Worlds, then Nation and Narration, then Culture and Imperialism. The Wretched, more than knowing the particular dates of events, that is important. It's good if you can remember, but this aspect of knowing the chronology is more important in terms of your UGC NET exam. So always keep that in mind. You should have an idea which came before that, which came after that, even if you are not able to memorize all the dates. Now, see, these are the dates of publication. Now, given below are the two statements. One is labeled as assertion and the other labeled as reason. Assertion A. In the absurd plays of Pinter and Beckett, lack of communication seems to be a predominant theme. Second one, that is reason. Existential philosophy had a tremendous influence on the dramatists of the period. Nihilism and meaninglessness of life taking a front seat. In the context of the above statements, which one of the following is correct? Assertion means you are trying to say something with surety. Reason is like you said something before, and this second statement is the reason for that statement. So is that correct? So which are the options? Both A and R are true, and R is the correct explanation of A. Both A and R are true, but R is not the correct explanation of A. A is true, but R is false. A is false, but R is true. So which would be the correct answer? Anyone? Shahana has answered C. A is true, but R is false. Correct. That is correct, because the first statement about such plays is true because they are kind of avant-garde plays. But the second statement is not the reason for the first statement. It is again another statement about that kind of works. It is not the reason for the first statement. So both are true, but this is not the explanation of that. Now, who is John Livingston Lowes talking about in the following line? He found English a dialect and left it a language. I'm sorry, you saw the option already. So it is Chaucer. So it's okay, you can learn that information that John Livingston Lowes gave a statement about Chaucer. It was such a, what to say, he admired him, you can see that. He found English a dialect and left it a language. Now, what is a dialect? What is a language? You should know that in your linguistic studies, what is dialect. So it was merely a dialect which he transformed into a full-fledged language. That is his comment. Rhetoricians in ancient days studied dash, which can now be termed as literary criticism. This we discussed in our lecture, I remember very well. Can anybody give a right answer? Question number 15. Which is the right answer? Is it poema or is it poiesis? Is it mimesis? Is it peripetia? I hope you know what mimesis is. Mimesis is not the answer, Maushami. The answer is poiesis. We discussed that when we discussed the slide of ancient critics. Poema is the structure of a poem. Mimesis is imitation. Peripetia and anagnorisis we will learn when you learn about tragedy in detail. Aristotle's definition of tragedy. Now, which of the following sentences doesn't fit Longinus's description of sublime? The concept of sublime was put forward by Longinus in his work Perihypsos. Which that work is believed to be his work. It is, you don't have a clarity about that, but it is believed to be like that. So his statement about the concept of sublime. Jobina has given an answer. Which of the following sentences does not fit? Oh, okay. The answer was for the earlier question, I guess. 16th, question number 16. Do you know which is the answer? Creates persuasion, a certain distinction and excellence in expression, scatters everything like a thunderbolt, leads to identification with the creative process of the artist. Mahjabin, Suhail, Mukhtar, Jobina. Okay, I'm sorry, the right answer is creates persuasion. Why the right answer is create persuasion? Because it does not fit the description of sublime by Longinus, because Longinus defined sublime as something in art which does not need persuasion. Persuasion means, what is persuasion? We are trying to talk somebody into something. We are giving different pros and cons. We are giving detailed lecture. Sublime is not that. Sublime is like thunderbolt. When it comes, it strikes like lightning, and you are taken, elevated into another level that you do not need persuasion. You are elevated into another level, and you identify with the creative process of the artist. You don't need definition, you don't need persuasion, you don't need long lectures. So sublime, this definition, everything else describes sublime, but not creates persuasion. It transports into ecstasy. That is the definition of sublime. An Apology of Poetry, Sidney discusses the didactic function of poetry by comparing it to philosophy and dash, religion, aesthetics, history, and ethics. What is the right answer? Religion, aesthetics, history, and ethics. An Apology of Poetry, Sidney discusses the didactic function of poetry by comparing it to philosophy and the right answer is religion. How poetry and religion is different. This, when you study detail about this work by Sidney, which was written as a response to another work which abused poetry. Okay. According to Longinus, which two of the following qualities apply to great poetry? We just now discussed about sublime of Longinus, the concept of sublime. So, which two qualities apply to great poetry? Anybody? Which two qualities? A is one right answer. One more. A and it is not A and C, Adira. It is A and B. Okay. It must be the work of genius, an inspired person, and it must create a feeling of melancholy in the reader. Okay. Arrange the following texts in the chronological order of publication. These are all texts from or connected with which theory? It is very obvious. Can somebody tell me? These texts, these works are all associated with which theory? Feminism. Very good. Feminism. Najabin, it's feminism. I know all of you know that. So the correct answer is D, B, A, and C. So there is no point in explaining this a lot because You should know the dates, only then you can know that. Or you should have an idea of which comes or who comes after who, all that. So the feminine mystique in 1963, sexual politics in 1970, and the bridge called my back, 1981. It's an anthology work. And Gender Trouble by Judith Butler in 1990. Now, who is the author of the essay, Leo Tolstoy and the Fool? So that is George Orwell. Already you saw the answer. Okay. Anyway, there is no point because I haven't taught you all this. So if you know, it's good. Otherwise, you have a new information. Which of the following clusters is associated with Julia Kristeva's term, the semiotic? So I hope you remember, we just passed through like a symbolic and semiotic. So which is this out of the four options, which is the right answer? Semiotic. Julia Kristeva's concept of semiotic language. So I'll give a clue, like she defined this as a language which women should use for their writing, which is different from the patriarchal language. Anyone? So, yeah, somebody has replied. Sorry, authority, order, and patriarchy is connected with symbolic writing. The right answer is displacement, slippage, and condensation. Okay, we'll learn all that in feminism. Which two of the following conform to Northrop Frye's typology of literature? Okay, so I missed one slide here. We also have a detailed session on archetypal criticism. Okay, that is one PPT I missed. Somehow it was missed out. We will have a detailed discussion on archetypal literature, who the major proponents, the concepts, ideas, etc. So this question is from that area. So he connects, Northrop Frye connects the seasons of nature with different genres of literature. So spring, comedy; summer, satire; autumn, tragedy; winter, romance. Out of this, two are correct as per Northrop Frye's typology. Which are those? Okay, spring, comedy, right? It makes some sense. Like spring, everything is flowering and beautiful. So it can be connected with comedy, right? Summer, satire. No, actually Northrop Frye connects summer with romance, and autumn, tragedy is correct, and winter is for satire. Okay, so the right answer is A and C. That is spring, comedy, and autumn, tragedy. Autumn, where all the leaves fall down. It is tragic, no? They were so beautiful, the trees and nature and everything is going down into a gray. This is about the winter, which it is not about our winter, summer, etc. You should think about the European context. Okay. Which among the following titles set a course for academic literary feminism? This you should answer, right? Which among the following titles set a course for academic literary feminism? Nostromo, From Ritual to Romance; A Room of One's Own; A Dance to the Music of Time. Very good. Mahjabin, it is C. It is by Virginia Woolf, A Room of One's Own. In this work, she describes the importance, how important it is for a woman to have financial independence and a space of her own to produce literature. And she even gives a comparison, like Shakespeare's. If there was a sister, Shakespeare had a sister and had equal capacities like Shakespeare, literary capacities, she would not be able to create or produce so much of quality literature at that time, because women's options were so limited in terms of education, in terms of societal dignity, space, finances, etc. A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. Now, two pioneering feminist tracts, Kate Millett's Sexual Politics and Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch, were published in the same year. Which is that year? Both works, Sexual Politics and Female Eunuch, was published in one of these years. Same year, 1 year. Which is that? Any idea? Again, Mahjabin, very good. It is 1970. That is the right answer. Okay. Now, who defined poetry as the best words in the best order? So these are all romantic poets, if you look at it: Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, and Shelley. So who told that poetry is the best words in the best order? It is Coleridge, S.T. Coleridge, who defined poetry as the best words in the best order. Now, who among the following theorists formulated the concept of utile dulls, or dulls utile, that is profit combined with delight? Plato, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus. Plato, Aristotle, Horace, and Longinus. We have only 2 more questions. Okay. The right answer is C. The right answer is C, and it is Horace. Horace believed that poetry should be delightful, as well as it should be giving some information. It should be useful and delightful. Without pleasure, there is no point in instructing, and pleasure should come with some instruction also, some useful knowledge also. In the defense of poetry, what did Sidney attribute to poetry? A magical power whereby poetry plays tricks on the reader, a divine power whereby poetry transmits a message from God to the reader, a moral power whereby poetry encourages the reader to evaluate virtuous models, a realistic power that cannot be made to seem like mere illusion and trickery. What would be the right answer, students? The right answer is C. A moral power whereby poetry encourages the reader to evaluate virtuous models. Now the last one is again match the following. Match the following questions come often for this UGC NET. It comes, always it comes. And the thing is, the luck is that if you have if you're really sure of 2 answers, you might be able to make it right. You don't necessarily have to know all the answers. If you know, it's well and good, but even with knowing 1 or 2 answers, you can work it out. If you give a little logical thinking, it will be easily, you'll be easily able to find it out. So here, there are different theories or concepts of criticism, schools of criticism, and the major critics associated with each. So any idea, like formalism, new criticism? Who among them is new criticism? We discussed the word John Crow Ransom. I hope you remember. Then formalism, it is Russian formalism. So you can give a guess. See, students, you have to guess also. Victor Shklovsky. Out of these words, which theorist's name looks like a Russian name? If at all you really don't know the answer, also you can guess that. If you know that formalism is also Russian formalism, so it's Victor Shklovsky. Then psychological theory of the value of literature, Richards, I.A. Richards. Then literary art as an archetypal image. I told you we'll discuss archetypal criticism in detail. There you know about Carl Jung, who described the power of the collective unconscious and all. So literary art as an archetypal image, right? The Jungians, or those who promote or propagate Carl Jung's ideas. Now the right answer is A, which is 3142. That is 3. Formalism, Victor Shklovsky. New critics, John Crow Ransom. Psychological theory of value of literature, I.A. Richards. Literary art as an archetypal image, the Jungians. Okay. So that's all for today, students. I hope you enjoyed the session and it was useful for you, at least if I could give you some information. I'll be so happy for that. So thank you all for the patience and the very good response that I got from you. And really sorry for the hiccup that happened where you could not see the screen, which I was sharing. I'm really sorry for that. So I really look forward to meeting you again in future. Thank you.